Tonight, actually, B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to be finishing the first section of Mesilas Yesharim, the section which is to do with the midot, which are called sidkut, which we have the word tzaddik, which is basically what is a tzaddik? Who is a tzaddik? Somebody who does what it says in the Shulchan Aruch. And this is the end of the first part of the book, and from now, after this chapter we'll do tonight, B'ezrat Hashem, chapter 12, we're going to be launching off into the areas of life which are called Chasidut. Chasidus is nothing to do with a movement of Jewry 200 years ago, where there was a division, let's say, between so-called Litvaks and the Hasidim. That's not the sort of Chasidut we're talking about. When we come to the end of the chapter, we'll discuss that. But what I want to do right now is to finish off the first part of the section of the Sefer, as we said, chapter 12, B'darkei Knius HaNikius. We spoke a lot about Nikius. Nikius is this idea of literally of cleanliness, that after a person has learned the basics of Sumeira, of being Zohir, of being watchful, of thinking about his actions and making sure he doesn't transgress any of the mitzvahs lo saseh, and he's then inculcated into himself the mitzvah of zrizus, alacrity, which are to do with the positive mitzvahs. So the idea of nikius, and of course how you do all those things, we talked about that as well. The idea of nikiut is this level of really scrutiny in those areas to make sure that there's no stone unturned, so to speak, that everything is examined, a person's his actions are examined in great detail, his thoughts are examined in great detail, his shmiras mitzvahs are examined in great detail by himself, his midot, his character traits, the way he behaves to himself, to other people, his avodas Hashem, all of these things now become reanalyzed on this level of nikiut, of cleanliness. Now, how does a person, which is what we're going to talk about tonight, acquire nikiut? It says, the true way. Now, when he says true, it means that's the only way. The only way of acquiring nikiut. Who hasmada hakriya b'divrei chamim zal, is to read Chazal, to learn Chazal. Im b'inyonei halachos, whether we're talking about... now, of course, we're not just talking about learning them for the first time. It means a constant revision and review. Whether we're talking about Chazal when they speak about the halachos, or when they talk about musarim, character development, character traits, behavior, human behavior. Once a person's already understood the necessity that he has to be a noki. Why does he have to be a noki? As we said before, you see on bottles of orange juice, 99% pure. So 99% pure is like saying it's not pure, because pure by definition is something which is totally pure. Something which is only 99% pure can't be called pure. I don't know what you call it, but purity means to be that there is no area, there's no wiggle room for anything less. So a person has to, once he understands the obligation, the truth, the obligation the person has to be noki, to clean himself out completely, to examine everything he does. And the necessity for that, as we said before, because really a person, if he doesn't finish the job, now I'm not going to say he's done nothing, but he basically hasn't really achieved what he's capable of. Hisig hazihirus vazrizos, after once he's achieved zihirus, watchfulness, being careful not to transgress the Torah's negative commandments, vazrizos, and alacrity, making sure that he's always goes forward and does the mitzvahs as they come to his hand, or as we discussed in various ways that the mitzvah presents itself to a person. And to the extent that he's already acquired these, and and distance himself from those things which will keep him distant from them, meaning he's already examined those things, the ways he acquires these attributes, and he's identified those things which are going to keep him, which are going to distance him from getting to that target. He knows these. He knows those. Hine lo yish'aru loi ata ikuvim liknos hanikius ela yedias adikdukim asher b'mitzvos kedei sheyuchal lehizar b'kulam. It's having a very interesting idea. Once a person has inculcated into himself the necessity to be a Noki, and he understands that there's no real, on this level anyway, perfection without him becoming a Noki. It's not just enough to be a Zoya, but he has to be a Noki. Has to be not just enough for him to be watchful, not to transgress the Torah's mitzvahs, but he has to be clean in every way possible that he can from transgressing them. And he's also examined what his obligations are, the positive mitzvahs. And he's developed the zeal, the alacrity, to go forward and always do the mitzvahs when he can. Once he's done that, so the idea of Nikius is that, of course, in order to perform these things to the nth degree, to the perfection that's possible for a human being, he has to have knowledge. He has to understand in every aspect, and we're going to speak about that now, whether that be mitzvahs lo saseh. He has to understand what it is, could be that because of lack of knowledge, not through a lack of desire, or a lack of willingness, or a lacking of commitment, but merely through a sheer lack of knowledge of to what extent the Torah demands in this particular area, this particular mitzvah, how far this mitzvah goes. If he doesn't know that, then clearly he can't be a Noki. Why? Because unwittingly, he will find himself having transgressed the mitzvah. And similarly, the other way around, in terms of a positive mitzvah, he doesn't know how far, let's say, Kibud al Va'im goes. He hasn't studied the subject. He hasn't studied Shabbos clearly. And Chovetz Chaim said very clearly that a person who isn't constantly involved in learning Shmira Shabbos will inevitably break a law of keeping Shabbos. Shabbos is very complex, very extensive. So to be a Noki requires that a person constantly reviews and again to make sure that his understanding of the performance of the mitzvah is to the deepest possible level. Therefore, by necessity, he requires a thorough knowledge with great clarity of what the mitzvahs are, positive and negative. Ladas anveya mitzvahs, to understand all the branches of the mitzvahs, how far those branches extend. V'gam lefi she ha-shchicha mutsuya b'dvarim hadakim ha'ela. To the extent that something is fine and precise, so it's very easy if a person isn't constantly involved in examining and refreshing his memory, he'll get a kind of blurry when it comes to the fine points of something. He'll know generally there's an idea what Shabbos is, and generally, what let's say the mitzvah of Borer is, or the Isser of Borer, not selecting on Shabbos, but he'll very likely, unless he constantly refreshes his mind and memory, forget certain pratim, certain details, certain pratim, details of details, which of course are essential and vital in order to not break Shabbos. Titztarech. A person needs to have a constancy, a hasmada, in the learning, the reading of Sfarim, books, which clarify these fine points, these super fine points, in order that besichlo, that they're clear in his mind and in his memory. V'oz vada, and then certainly she is oire l'kayamam. Then he will certainly be awakened to keep them because he understands more and more what's involved in them. Now, this idea of precision in mitzvahs is something that sometimes people find very difficult to understand. What does it really matter? I remember somebody saying to me once, Rabbi, I really can't believe that God cares whether I put my right shoe on before my left or my left before my right, and whether I tie up the right shoe before the left or the left. Why do we need all these, super duper, super fine precision? And the answer is quite simply, is that every activity that a person finds himself in life must axiomatically have the potential to either raise him up, raise the world with him, or the reverse. It would be, as Rav Schiller once said, to accuse the Ribono Shel Olam, the creator of the world, of tremendous sloppiness, chas v'chalila. If there are just vast grey areas in life, which really had no importance one way or the other. If Hashem created the world, and He created the entire world for one reason, which was to reveal His glory, so to speak, and that is done by the Jewish people performing the mitzvahs, then it must be that if there's something called a right foot and a left foot, then it must be that there's a proper way to put your shoes on those feet. The thing is, we tend to, I think I mentioned this once before, we tend to look at the world the way the world is, and then Hashem, so to speak, gave us the mitzvahs to cope with the world. It's not true. Hashem looked into the Torah and created the world. The world is merely a reflection of a spiritual reality, and that spiritual reality could have been anything Hashem wanted it to be. Dahainu, for example, let's take the mitzvah of kibbud av v'em. A person might think, well, person has parents and he has to respect them, he has to honor them. Not true. Because there's a mitzvah in the Torah of kibbud av v'em, Hashem created parents in order for us to fulfill the mitzvah. Now this is very, counterintuitive, but it all comes from a worldview of seeing what is and understanding therefore that everything is really enthralled to what is, but that's not true. Nothing needs to be unless Hashem wanted it to be that way. And therefore, if this particular thing exists in my life, if there's such a thing called a right foot and a right shoe, it must be that there's a way that I can put on my shoe and I can put on in such a way that creates a positive energy in this world by doing the mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to put your right shoe on before your left. Now, why that is, of course, goes into deeper Kabbalistic understanding. But the basic idea is clear. Theoretically, it would have been possible to create man as a single cell, self-replicating organism. We don't really need parents. I'm sure Hashem could have found a way in order to have a human race without parents. So what?
It was supposed to be that way.
Say it again?
I think originally it was sort of supposed to be that
way. Oh, yes?
And then Hashem separated Adam.
In Achanami, that's true. There's a medrash about that. Hashem created them as one. That's true. But the point I want to bring out is that everything which is doesn't have to be. It's only because Hashem wants it to be that way. And therefore every part of our life has, to the extent that existence is precise, so the mitzvahs which obtain to it also precise. And for a person to be a noki, he has to have the knowledge and the input and the constant attention to these details, which, if were not for that, he would tend to forget. He wouldn't forget there's something called Shabbos. But the details of Shabbos, for sure, unless he's constantly learning Shabbos, he will forget them, without a doubt. Okay. Similarly, we talked about the precision which is required for mitzvahs. Similarly, v'chein be'inyan hamidos, character traits. Not really character traits. Midos means the way you behave, the way that a person should be kind, he shouldn't be selfish, he shouldn't be a balgaiva, shouldn't be conceited, shouldn't be lustful. All of these areas of the human personality, which we've talked about in previous weeks. It's muchrachas, it's essential. It demands a muchrachas lo kriyas mamre hamusa, to learn, as we are now doing, musas for him. And of course, as he says in the beginning, learning a musas for a sefer doesn't mean that you just flick through it. It means you go over it and over it and over it, because the way to learn Musa, and in a way which will inspire you and affect you, is to constantly go over and over these same ideas, and to think about them and to go over them and constantly read them. whether those be the Musafodim of the Kadmonim, of the early rabbis, or the Achronim, or the later ones, Kipamim rabbis, afilu acha shikra ha'adam ba'atzma lios, shiyikba, even though a person has already decided, he's fixed it in his target, his eyes on the fact that he wants to be from those, amongst those are the medakdekim, who are precise, hanikim, and are clean in the sense that their performance as people, as Rav Volby once said, a Jew is a professional human being. They've become professionals at life in every way, in their avodas Hashem, in their relationship with other people and with themselves. Even that a person may have understood very clearly that that's what he wants to be, and that's the only way that it makes sense that a person should be. Ev shalo shi'asham b'protim. As I said before, it's very possible that he can make a mistake and cause a sin in the details. Mipnei shalo higia liyidiyos behem, because he never got to understand those things. He's talking about the relationship of Musa, of to what extent a person has to refine his character traits. It's not just enough that a person doesn't sit down and wolf large amounts of super kosher meat, as right the Ramban says, right, Kedoshim too is going to be speaking about that. Doesn't mean that it just person doesn't behave in a crass or a gross way. It means that there's a feinkeit, there's a delicacy, there's a sophistication in a person's understanding of the way it is that a human being should behave, and that is something which, to be a noki in those areas of one's character, a person has to constantly read Sfarim and understand that this is what is considered to be acceptable, and this, even though may not seem so bad, but that's already not called a noki in terms of your behavior. Ki eina adam nolad chochem. A person is not born wise. Yashalo ladat es hakol. A person doesn't know everything. Ach, the only way he's going to learn, he's going to find, is by bekias. Sorry, bekriyas hadvarim. Reading those things is oreh b'ma shelo yoda, in areas that he doesn't know. The whole idea of reading is to understand and discover areas of avodas Hashem, areas of the character, areas of halacha, which he wasn't aware of. And that's what it means to be a noki. V'yizboinin ba b'ma shelo hiskil mitchila, and to become awakened and delve into those things which he didn't understand immediately. And even not those things which he necessarily might find in books. Kibios, sichlo, ne'or al hadova, holech umashkech al kol atztodim, umamsi inyonim chadoshim mimekor ha'emes. It's a very interesting idea, this. He's saying by a person waking himself up, allowing himself, sensitizing himself to these areas of nikius, of improvement, of cleaning his performance out completely. So he will be able to take that and he'll be able to extrapolate that further than what he read in books. He'll be able to find, once his mind is alive to these things, once a person has turned that switch on, the switch of nikius, so therefore, by definition, he will go through all the rest of his life, his actions, his mitzvahs, his character traits, his avodas Hashem, and he will bring forth new and better, cleverer, more subtle, more sophisticated understandings of how it is that he can improve himself as a Jew and how he can become a better Eved Hashem. V'omnom mafsidei hamida hazois. So what takes a person away from cleanliness, the kiyas, are all those things which detract from zehirus. If you remember right at the beginning, we said there were three principal things that stop a person being a zohir, being watchful, thinking about what he should be doing. One is tirda, tirda, how do you say, being overly preoccupied in this world, keeping one's nose to the grindstone, as Paro did in Mitzrayim. The hallmark of all repressive regimes is to keep people very busy. if you work them so hard that their minds can't think about anything else, they're less likely to rebel. So the Yetzer Hara wants to keep a person busy, morgen, from day to night, doing stuff, do this, and you won't have a chance to think. So that's the thing that detracts a person from being a zohir, and similarly, a little bit detracts a person from being a noki. The second thing is schok velotzon, scoffing and mockery, to look at things and to take the value out of them. There was an English writer who once said a cynic is somebody who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. To make things small, to make big things small, to scoff. One good, clever joke at the end of the mashgichs, Musa Shmuz, where you got all fired up about it, and somebody comes along and says a nice joke, the whole thing collapses like a balloon. So a person has to be very wary of schok, laughter, scoffing. And the third thing is bad company. All of those three aspects, which remove a person from being a zoya, also will for sure remove a person from being a noki for the same reasons. Also, this is really his chiddush here, apart from those three that we mentioned in the earlier stages of a person's elevation, spiritual elevation. There's another one, v'nosav aleihem chesron habekius habiyadius hadinim o hamusarim, as he said out, a lack of deep knowledge and understanding when it comes to dinim, the Torah's laws, or the the degree of subtle character improvement, to what degree that is required of a person. Shemok Kasavti, as I already wrote. Ukavar Amru Chazal. Chazal already wrote in Avos. For lo ha'ama aretz chosid. An ama aretz cannot be a chosid. Now it's interesting, even though he's not talking about chasidus, he's still talking about tzidkus. That's what to discuss there, but even though an ama aretz cannot be a chosid, an ama aretz also can't be a tzaddik. Ki mi shelo yeda, somebody who doesn't know, efshar lo lasos, he can't do. A person can only do what he knows. So he has to know in order that he can do, and that his doing should be of the best possible kind. V'chein omer, it says in Kedushin, Talmud Godel Shemevi Lidei Masa. Learning is great because it brings to the hands of action. But of course, a person can't act, as that's his point, without him being able to, without knowledge. Okay, I think maybe, seeing as we've reached a landmark here, we'll take a pause and continue next week with the Midah of Precious. Just 1 second before you turn off the camera. A brief introduction to set us up for next week. I said this once at the beginning, and I may have said it again in the meantime, but I think it has to be stressed. Everything we've discussed up to now, a Jew is expected and obliged to do. From here on in, all the rest of the chapters we're going to see from now on are things which are called lifnim mishur sadin, which are, so to speak, beyond what we're obliged to do. Now, I may be insulting you, but I can speak about myself. But I think very few of us will actually be able to achieve these levels of Chassidus. Up to now, it's been Tzidkus, and now we're going to go into Chassidus. So, actually, somebody once pointed out that it said that Noach was ish tzaddik b'dorosov. Noach is a tzaddik. And Avram Avinu comes along, and Avram is the pillar of chesed. Chesed la'Avraham. So the chesed is the root of chasidus, the same word. Avram was a chosid. Again, not the chasidim of the Baal Shem Tov. He had the midah of chasidus. Noach had the midah of tzidkus. Tzidkus is a lower level than chasidus. Tzidkus says like this: there's a job to be done, and I have to do it because it's incumbent upon me. In other words, Noah had to feed all the animals in the teva, because if not, they would die. But if there could have been this automatic milking and feeding and cleaning up of all the sties and all the cages over there, he would have been perfectly happy. Avram Avinu, it's not that the job has to be done, it's I want to find the job to be done. The idea of a chassid is that he wants there to be the opportunity for the chesed to be done. For example, it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw that Avram Avinu, despite the fact that on the third day of his bris milah was in a tremendous amount of pain, it bothered him more than the physical pain that he was not able to do the mitzvah of hachnosas orchim, and therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu created these malachim who looked like Arabs to come so that Avram Avinu would be able to do the mitzvah of hachnosas orchim. In other words, the level of Avram Avinu, the level of chassidus is not just, like a tzaddik. A tzaddik says, this has to be done. Nobody else to take care of it, I'm going to do it. It's my job. He'll do it with simcha. But if it's not, there's no job to be done there, it's not going to be bothered. It's not going to bother him. It would bother a chassid. It bothered Avram Avinu that he wouldn't be able to do the mitzvah of hachnosas orchim. That's one of the differences. The other difference we said is that, of course, everybody is expected to be a tzaddik. Everybody can be a tzaddik. I'm not going to say it's easy, but from what the Mesilas says, that's clear. And the level of chassidus is something which is going to be above most people. The question is then, why are we learning it? Especially in our day and age where through Yeridus Adoris, the descent of the generations, we are on a very, very, very low spiritual level. So why bother? And I gave you two answers before, and I'll just reiterate them. The two answers are as follows. The mere fact that a person understands, learns about these levels of chassidus, even though he will never ever reach them, will make him a different person. Knowledge of things, as he said here, makes you a different person. You may not be able to touch by any means at all those levels but the fact that you know such a level exists already makes you a higher person. That's number one. Number two, it could be, even though for sure most people will never be able to stay on those levels, achieve that level and stay there. What it says in the pasuk, Mi yokum bahar Hashem. What's the last one to say? Mi aleh bahar Hashem. Mi yokum b'mkom kodshoy. David HaMelech says in Tehillim, in Psalms, who can ascend to the mountain of Hashem, and who can stand in his holy place? It's maybe a person once in his life will be able to touch one of these levels, the levels of precious, the level of whatever it is, of anova, the level of yira. Maybe for a split second he'll be on that level. For that it was worth learning all of these chapters. Okay, so we're going to start Bezrat Hashem next week, probably our last meeting before Pesach. I don't know, we'll have to see, but actually I'm not sure I'm going to be here next week. I just thought I have to. Okay, we'll see how it works out. But Bezrat Hashem, we will carry on with chapter 13, which is the Midah of Precious.